Okay, welcome back. So we are on to the final part, I hope the final part three of our lecture of realism to early modernism. And so I wanted to talk just a little bit about how all the different artists who were part of the Impressionist group or who were often included in that group. There are just so many, and we don't have time to cover all of them. And so, but I do want to cover, to me, I think Monet and Morisot are the two artists who most kind of like really feel like the truest, purest um, versions of that kind of ideal where they were painting, from life, painting in the moment, and really kind of like letting painting just be mark and shape on the surface. And I think Morisot is still is underrated, is a artist who needs more attention. Monet became, in some ways, um, the great grandfather kind of figure of the Impressionist movement. Although a little bit younger than Manet, he kind of uh, was emblematic of the just this extreme desire to really just see shape and color. And more the Impressionists became interested in the representation of ambient color. And what I mean by that, as we can see here in the Rouen Cathedral series, is he's interested in how the color of light, the color of atmosphere, and observing that. So he's looking at an object that pretty much has almost no local color of its own. It's just this kind of pale stone that then he can use as a way of seeing all the different colors of each different moment of the day, each different kind of weather type. Um, and in the process of making these paintings, he made many of them. He sat, mostly painted them from the window, um, and of an apartment he had across the street. And he's has a painting for each almost every hour of the day, but also a painting for in the morning. If it's misty, pull out this painting. If it's raining, pull out this painting. So that each painting was a document of a particular kind of moment, a particular kind of light. So he was more painting the light in a way than he was the cathedral. And I think that the extremeness of where Monet went with just the idea of observation and color was freeing for a lot of artists and freed them to go in a whole bunch of other directions in terms of um, just how they can make art. And I think that and now we kind of group a lot of these artists who came after that period as quote unquote post-impressionists, but no one called them post-impressionists at the time. So that includes people like Van Gogh and Seurat and Cezanne. And Van Gogh is really an extraordinary painter, uh, like a, like a Mozart of oil painting, and just such a remarkable, intelligent color decisions. Seurat kind of took, so from Monet, I think someone like Van Gogh primarily took the freedom. Like if he could do this, if he could go this wild with his observations of the color, then I can do this. I think what Seurat took from Monet was the idea of truly understanding how colors work. And for Seurat, it was less about understanding the observation of color in the moment and more about how colors work on the surface of the painting. Seurat was really interested in the theories about optical mixing, how if you put multiple colors on a surface, you could create impressions of colors that aren't actually there. So he tried his best to create greens just through the repetition of yellows and blues, to create violets only through the repetitions of blues and reds. Um, and to a degree, I think that they work that way. But what's interesting to me is that as paintings, they work regardless or kind of separate from the issue of the optical mixing effects. These late Seurat paintings, I think, are truly gorgeous, um, and in these, I think because partially because he's not trying to represent local color with this optical mixing effect, but more trying to represent the atmosphere, the mood. of, like looking at surfaces that don't really have much in the way of local color, and so the changes of color on them are really about the changes of warm and cool and the lighting and the atmosphere. And then this more pointillist effect and more optical mixing effect works much better for that, I think. Um, and I just think that his way of kind of reducing things, simplifying things, is just so beautiful. And Cezanne, I believe, is the last artist we have to talk about today. And Cezanne really is going to set up what we're going to be talking about in terms of the next stage of modernism. Cezanne was highly influential on a lot of artists, but most especially on Braque, who I think is one of the great painters of the 20th century, and Picasso, and especially on the period where Braque and Picasso were sharing a studio and painting together. And really, they saw what they were doing as kind of like a continuation of what Cezanne had started. And I think that a lot of it has to do with this. Cezanne said that what he was aiming for was trying to take the modern painting, the painting of the Impressionists, and trying to make it have the solidity of museum painting. Um, and, and I can see that, but I think to me what's interesting about him, there are a lot of different things, but it's like this, one of the things that's interesting is this kind of planar shift, the way he's pushing in the corners of planes here or there. Everything's kind of fragmenting into not so much, rounded forms, but into each form being kind of like a twist or turn of the surface of the painting itself. And that kind of, that planar and become planar kind of way of thinking about groupings of shapes and colors becomes very influential on the cubists later. And it's an interesting kind of like way of both flattening the painting, but also finding a suggestion of volume in every kind of moment, every mark. All right, so that's where we're going to end. All right, next lecture is going to be about illustration.